Let's get to it. Here's the brief news from the world over this week. The Republican presidential field continues to take shape. Donald Trump won big with 35% of the vote in New Hampshire's primary on Tuesday. He was followed by John Kasich in second place and Ted Cruz, followed by Jeb Bush. Marco Rubio disappointed, to say the least, with his fifth-place finish, apparently wounded by his debate performance there. On to South Carolina for the candidates. Trump is standing at 36% in the latest polls, followed by Cruz, Rubio, and Bush. On the Democratic side, it was a landslide. Bernie Sanders defeated Hillary Clinton in Tuesday's primary, winning 60% of the vote to Clinton's 38%. Clinton will be looking to return the favor in South Carolina, where she's up in the latest polls, 62% to 32%. More on the race for the White House in our next segment. And the GOP frontrunner Donald Trump offered a critique of Pope Francis's visit to the U.S.-Mexico border next week. He told Fox News that the Pope is a very political person who doesn't understand the danger associated with the United States southern border. Trump has repeatedly pledged to build a wall between the U.S. and Mexico. Trump suggested that Mexico put the Pope up to visiting the border because, quote, they're making a fortune and we're losing, end quote. In the Jubilee Year of Mercy, this last week of Lent has become a week of reconciliation. In Havana on Friday, Pope Francis and Russian Orthodox Patriarch Kirill of Moscow meet in an historic first-time encounter. The first time the heads of these churches have met in nearly 1,000 years. The Eastern Orthodox churches broke from Rome in the Great Schism of 1054. The Pope will make a stop in Havana on his way to Mexico to meet the Patriarch, who happens to be in Cuba for an official visit. Their scheduled two-hour private meeting will conclude with the signing of a joint declaration. Catholic relations with the Russian Orthodox have always been a little frosty. We'll have much more on the significance of this historic summit later in the show. And in what is being hailed as a landmark step in reconciliation between the Church of England and Rome, Catholic Vespers were prayed in London's Hampton Court, the palace of King Henry VIII. It is the infamous historic site where Henry VIII broke ties with Rome in 1530. Tuesday was the first time a Roman Catholic liturgy or service has been celebrated there in 400 years. Cardinal Vincent Nichols celebrated Vespers with the Anglican Bishop of London. The two spoke of the historic encounter, saying the churches must set aside centuries of division and recognize they have a common agenda in a more secular age. The service was one of many events celebrating the palace's 500th anniversary. And on Wednesday, Pope Francis met with Iraqi Prime Minister Haidar al-Abadi in a friendly private audience at the Vatican. Niceties and gifts aside, the two spoke in particular about the critical situation of Christians living in Iraq and the humanitarian crisis created by ISIS. The meeting comes on the heels of an Iraqi Christian boycott of a parliament-sponsored conference on interreligious and ethnic relations in the war-torn country. Chaldean Catholic Patriarch Louis Sacco said there is no need for such meetings if the government cannot or will not protect the rights of minorities. He said, unfortunately, none of their promises made by government or Islamic leaders have become reality. And the Catholic Church in Germany is calling for the number of migrants entering the country to be reduced. Cardinal Reinhard Marx, chairman of the German Bishops' Conference, said in an interview last week that Germany cannot take in all the world's needy. He went on to urge world leaders to deal with the refugee crisis with reason and clarity. Cardinal Marx's request contrasts with Pope Francis's recent call for the world's parishes to accept and welcome refugees. The flood of migrants into Germany, particularly from the Middle East, have been met with protests by some who say they pose a danger to the country and to Europe as a whole. Meanwhile, the U.S. bishops are calling for a new national Catholic-Muslim dialogue. The USCCB announced the initiative on Monday, naming Chicago Archbishop Blaise Cupich as its first co-chairman. The USCCB says the church must model real dialogue and goodwill as the conversation surrounding Islam grows more fearful. And a Satanist group demand to lead a civic prayer has silenced the City Council of Phoenix, Arizona, literally silenced them. This past week, the City Council voted to replace a decades-long tradition of prayer before meetings with a moment of silence. The move was aimed at preventing a scheduled invocation by the so-called Satanic Temple. They were on the agenda for February 17th. The 5-4 City Council vote also avoids what was expected to be a lawsuit over the constitutional rights of the group. The Satanic Temple member who submitted the prayer request said his organization doesn't actually believe that Satan is real, but they are just trying to ensure minority religious voices are included. The city of Scottsdale, just east of Phoenix, has taken a different tack. They are letting the Satanic Temple lead an opening prayer in April. And returning to the themes of mercy and reconciliation, Pope Francis unleashed his army of super confessors just in time for Lent. The Holy Father has handpicked more than 1,000 priests from around the world. They are officially known as missionaries of mercy. Their charge? To bring back home those who have left the faith and encourage repentance for all. The priests have been given the authority to forgive sins usually reserved to the Pope himself, such as desecration of the Eucharist or satanic worship. The Pope urged the confessors to cover the sinner with a blanket of mercy. Father John Paul of the Franciscan Missionaries of the Eternal Word was among those chosen to be a super confessor by the Holy Father. And EWTN paid for the special Missionaries of Mercy stoles received by all the priests chosen. Now, speaking of mercy, I thought I would extend a little mercy to those of you who have not yet entered my Will Wilder, The Relic of Perilous Falls limited box contest. Though the book won't be released until March 8th, if you retweet or repost on Facebook the info about the book contest, you will be qualified to win a special early reader and this box before release. I'll announce the winners next week. Remember to follow me on Twitter so I can DM you winners. You can also email me at raymond@raymondarroyo.com. Put Will Wilder Book Contest in the subject line. Will Wilder, The Relic of Perilous Falls, is available for pre-order now from the EWTN Religious Catalog and at bookstores everywhere.